Yeah, let's discuss what do we mean by a lease term. Ind AS 116 says that lease term is the summation of the following. We have to start with the non-cancelable period. If there is any lease agreement and the lease agreement mentions that lease cannot be cancelled for a period of 5 years, then this is the first thing that will be included, right? 5 years. Then they are saying periods covered by an option to extend the lease if the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise that option. After 5 years, you are given an option that do you want to extend this lease period by another 5 years, let's say, by another 5 years. At the commencement of the lease, the lessee is reasonably certain that yes, I will exercise this particular option. Then in that particular case, right, 5 plus 5, I will consider the lease term to be 10 years. 5 years is non-cancelable, and at the end of the 5th year, I have a right of extending the lease by another 5 years. And as a lessee, I am very clear right now that yes, I will exercise that particular option. So one can say that the lease commencement date, 10 years is the lease term. Okay. In 3, they are saying periods covered by an option to terminate the lease if the lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise that particular option. Right. This time we do not have a non-cancelable period. See, this time it is something in this way that the lease term is, let's say, 8 years. The lease term is 8 years. However, at end of 5th year, you have an option to terminate the contract. Option to terminate. Think in this way. You are signing a lease agreement for 8 years, but when you go by clause analysis of the lease agreement, at the end of the 5th year, the lessee is given an option that if you wish, at the end of the 5th year, you can terminate the contract. But as a lessee, I am clear that I will not exercise that particular option. In other words, I will allow the lease to continue for its entire tenure of 8 years. So I will consider the lease term to be 8 years. In case if I am reasonably certain that I will exercise my option to terminate the lease contract, then I will consider the lease tenure to be of 5 years. Okay. The lease term begins at the lease commencement date. That's what they say. From the commencement date, we will calculate our lease term. The lease term starts when the lessor makes the underlying asset available for use by the lessee and includes any rent-free period. You are not charging any lease rent does not mean it is not a part of the lease term. It's very much a part of the lease term. The assessment of whether it is reasonably certain that the lessee shall exercise an extension or termination option should be done on the lease commencement date. We know the lease commencement date is the date when the underlying asset is made available by the lessor to the lessee. Okay, so on that particular date itself, all these calculations are to be done. It's quite possible that at a subsequent stage, the lessee may change the mind. See, right now I am of the view, let's say I am the lessee. Right now I am of the view that I will extend the lease contract. But maybe 2 years down the line, there can be a change of mind. Similarly, as of now, I am of the view that I will terminate the contract. But after 1 or 2 years down the line, I may be of the view that no, now I do not want to terminate the lease contract. So lease term can undergo a change at a subsequent stage. It will then become a part of lease modification, something that we'll be studying at a later stage. Right now, what you have to be clear with is that this is how the lease term is going to be determined. Every analysis will be done on the lease commencement date. Respond on the basis of Ind AS 116. Okay. Entity ABC enters into a lease for equipment that includes a non-cancelable term of 6 years. So there's a non-cancelable term of 6 years. So I put 6 over here. Non-cancelable term, so it will definitely become a part of the lease tenure. And a 2-year, okay, and a 2-year fixed price renewal option with future lease payments that are intended to approximate the market rates at the lease inception. There are no termination penalties or other factors in indicating that entity ABC is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option. What is the lease term? They are saying there are no termination penalties or other factors indicating that the entity ABC is reasonably certain. In other words, entity ABC is not reasonably certain to exercise the extension option. So this 2-year extension will perhaps not happen. So that's the reason we can say that the lease tenure is 6 years. Yeah, in B they are saying entity XYZ enters into a lease for a building that includes a non-cancelable term of 8 years. Okay, so let me take 8 and a 2-year market price renewal option. Before it takes possession of the building, entity XYZ pays for the leasehold improvements. The leasehold improvements are expected to have significant value at the end of the 8 years, and that value can only be realized through continued occupancy of the leased property. What is the lease term? So before we are taking the possession of the building, we are making changes to the building, right? They are saying that we are making leasehold improvements. So you are making certain changes to the building, and now you feel that because of all these changes, you will get the full benefit of the building only if you are running it for the extended period. Because they are saying the leasehold improvements are expected to have, I'm reading this, the leasehold improvements are expected to have significant value at the end of 8 years. See, I am a rational person. I have made changes in the building. Now I want to enjoy the full benefit of those changes. Because at the end of the 8th year, those changes still have value, it makes sense for me to use this building for another 2 years. Indirectly, they are trying to tell us that the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the option of extending the lease tenure. So I should consider another 2 years here, and I will consider the lease term to be 10 years. Entity PQR enters into a lease for an identified retail space in a shopping center. The retail space will be available to entity PQR for only the months of October, November, and December. So basically, it will be available for 3 months during a non-cancelable term of 7 years. Non-cancelable term of 7 years, right? The lessor agrees to provide the same retail space for each of the 7 years. What is the lease term? The lease term will turn out to be 21 months.